Recent CNN polls, 86% of Americans think our government is broken. 75% of Americans think government officials are dishonest.
According to a new Rasmussen poll, only 17% of likely American voters believe the current federal government has the consent of the governed.
Well, you know, we track this on a regular basis. I mean, this indicator has been getting consistently worse.
Ron Paul makes a lot of sense, and more people ought to listen to him. When Ron Paul ran for the Republican nomination in 2008, he talked about the economy imploding, the untenable nature of the national debt. In the 4 years since then, a lot of the things Ron Paul warned us about have happened. Paul's message hasn't changed, but the urgency of what he's saying has increased dramatically. And it seems like this time, more people may be listening.
What happens if you come to the conclusion, as millions of Americans have, that the parties aren't different? They're all the same. The monetary policy stays the same. The welfare system stays the same. The foreign policy stays the same.
Well, I think the people would respond if they knew the facts and if they'd been told the truth, but they haven't been. They've been lied to for the last 10 or 20 years by both sides.
But, you know, a lot of people voted for the president because he had indicated maybe he would have a different foreign policy. And I think they're very disappointed because he has expanded the wars rather than diminishing them.
More than a year after taxpayers bailed out Wall Street, still nothing in the way of real financial reform, and the bankers are right back making those great big bonuses. And what about progress on some of the other top priorities of the president? Healthcare, education, energy, Gitmo.
Because these issues that you've talked about, and I remember interviewing you back in 2008 about cutting spending, cutting the debt, shrinking government, really are front and center now.
I think what's changed is that a lot of ideas that Ron Paul has that people considered wildly eccentric or crazy 4 years ago are now widely seen to actually be correct.
A lot of elements of Ron Paul's political message got co-opted over the past 4 years by other Republican candidates this time around.
And he's been warning all of us about a lot of these issues for a long time.
One candidate continues to break fundraising records, smashing the single-day fundraising record of any Republican presidential candidate.
A survey by Rasmussen Reports finds that President Obama has a 1 percentage point edge over Congressman Ron Paul in a hypothetical 2012 race.
Romney topped Ron Paul on the ballot by just 1 vote.
Ron Paul was an overwhelming favorite, 40% of the vote.
For the last 2 years at the conservative CPAC convention,
the winner of the straw poll, Congressman Ron Paul.
The most Googled, you're big on the internet.
His fans are some of the most loyal in American political history.
He knows more substantively about these issues than probably everyone else on that stage combined.
The only person telling the Republican voters the truth, Jake, is Ron Paul.
I have a few questions for my colleagues. What if our foreign policy of the past century is deeply flawed and has not served our national security interests? What if we wake up one day and realize that the terrorist threat is a predictable consequence of our meddling in the affairs of others and has nothing to do with us being free and prosperous? What if occupying countries like Iraq and Afghanistan and bombing Pakistan is directly related to the hatred directed toward us? What if it is finally realized that war and military spending is always destructive to the economy? What if all wartime spending is paid for through the deceitful and evil process of inflating and borrowing? What if we finally see that wartime conditions always undermine personal liberty? What if the American people woke up and understood that the official reasons for going to war are almost always based on lies and promoted by war propaganda in order to serve special interests? What if we as a nation came to realize that the quest for empire eventually destroys all great nations? What if a military draft is being planned for the wars that will spread if our foreign policy is not changed? What if the American people learn the truth, that our foreign policy has nothing to do with national security, that it never changes from one administration to the next? What happens if my concerns are completely unfounded? Nothing. But what happens if my concerns are justified and ignored?
Since 1945, the U.S. has enjoyed being a global superpower, but in recent years, some foreign leaders and scholars have been predicting the end of the American empire. French historian and demographer Emmanuel Todd, who is credited with predicting the downfall of the Soviet Union, argued in 2003 that the U.S. was about to relinquish its place as the sole superpower. Why? The decline of its industrial base and more dependence on other countries for consumption. And in August 2008, NYU professor Nouriel Roubini wrote, quote, "Recent economic, financial, and geopolitical events suggest that the decline of the American empire has started."
Truth is simple. It is not complex.
The Constitution addresses this by saying, literally it says no theocracy, but it doesn't talk about church and state. The most important thing is the First Amendment. The Congress shall write no laws, which means Congress should never prohibit the expression of your Christian faith in a public place.
He is a force to be reckoned with. A three-time presidential candidate, congressman from Texas, OBGYN doctor, and leader of a revolution.
And they are roaring their approval for Ron Paul.
It's time we quit this. It's time. It's trillions of dollars we're spending on these wars. And I am convinced that liberty does not come from our government, but it comes from our Creator.
Because I think you're the one guy who has had this right from the very beginning. But it only makes common sense. If people know that the end is coming of the system that we have, nations will be redefined in this period. You know that people at the global level are looking at it and saying, okay, what's it going to look like?
There will be a realignment, and there's a struggle going on with us who believe that we should have national sovereignty. We should be out of the UN, out of the World Bank, out of the IMF, and no world government. But that is the movement that we're going in. That is the direction that we're going in. But they want to control capital, and they want to control the natural resources of the world. So, and they're not nationalistic at all. They believe in world government, and they're more out in the open now than they were 25 years ago.